he's a bully, and he's a bitch.
He's a punk. He's a dog. He's a pig.
And he can suck my
He's a con, a bullshit artist, a mutt.
I'll meet him in a hotel room any day of the week and give him a Louisville Slugger.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
Kiss my mother.
Which side of the aisle is really spewing hateful rhetoric?
Pointing what appears to be a water gun at the image of President Donald Trump projected on a whiteboard, art teacher Pale Modi has now been seen by countless viewers.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Weekdays from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, The J.J. McCartney Show, exposing the truth, exposing the lies, exposing the deep state.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage.
How much longer can America survive this kind of hatred?
Video depicting comedian Kathy Griffin holding the bloody, decapitated head of President Trump are no joking matter for the Secret Service.
The rhetoric that has inspired the violence has come from the mainstream of the Democratic Party.
They're involved in the coup, an active attempt to start a bloody civil war.
I want people to imagine an FBI director that has the stones to investigate the deep state. Imagine a justice system that has the integrity to prosecute corrupt government officials. They have refused to apply the 14th Amendment and give conservatives equal protection under the law. What we've seen here has been the gradual takeover of the government by corporatism, by globalism. They have wrested control of our government away from the citizenry and put it in the hands of a few special interests. And these special interests are as evil as the day is long.
We finally do have a president who has the integrity to do this. We finally do have a DOJ who has the integrity to do this. We know that we have people around the president who not only have the integrity, but have the information and the contacts to get everything done you just said. And you say, well, why aren't they doing it? Everything you're seeing on the news, that's what it's about. That's what this investigation's about. That's what calls of impeachment are about. That's what the globalist attack against Trump is about. That's what the hearings are about. That's what the allegations of Russian spying are about. It's about keeping them off point, keeping them off the agenda, keeping them off task. A lot of what you're watching happening right now, and the misdirection and the complete trying to keep Trump off target goes to that birth certificate. The worst crime in American history was perpetrated against America under the regime of Barack Obama. The media is complicit. Congress is complicit. Federal law enforcement apparently has been complicit. We've got a CIA whistleblower, Dennis Montgomery, whose attorney, Larry Klayman, put it all over the internet the other day that he has said that all of this spying that's been going on American people, that it resulted in manipulation and collusion with judges, Supreme Court justices, congressmen, etc., that James Comey was involved in it, that he was at the top of it. All of this stuff you're seeing about Donald Trump's with the Russians, Donald Trump needs to be impeached, Donald Trump, this is a smokescreen to keep our eyes off of what really happened and what's really going on. And America had better wake up to this, JJ.
Your federal government, your federal law enforcement agencies, our federal intelligence agencies, your federal government in toto has been compromised. The fact that Donald Trump has arrived and said, I'm not going to go along with the status quo anymore, is the cause for alarm for these people on the left. And ultimately, Carl, is it possible that yesterday was simply the first shot fired in an impending civil war between two irreconcilable ideologies?
I don't want our children and grandchildren to see or to participate or to fall victim to such a thing. I don't want our nation to go through such a thing. I don't know that we could survive that. Like Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, when he said, now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any other nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. I mean, God's people, we need to pray. We need to not be afraid to speak truth.
Weekdays from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, The J.J. McCartney Show. Exposing the truth, exposing the lies, exposing the deep state. The following is a Nightside Radio Studios production.
From the wind-powered Nightside Radio Studios,
tear down this wall.
This is the J.J. McCartney Show.
It's this man. It's the compassion. It's the dignity. It's the wisdom. It's the horse sense of the guy.
Did you know that 65% of the people murdered in the last 10 years were killed by handguns?
Would it make you feel any better, little girl, if they was pushed out of windows?
The American people have seen the truth, and they can see through your lies. There's coming a day when publications such as yours turn into nothing more than flea market advertising. They'll be handing it out for free in grocery store parking lots under everybody's windshield wiper. Yeah, that's the future for the Washington Post and the New York Times and every other liberal publication in this country. We are not going to tolerate your bull anymore. None of it. The American people are fed up. I thought we made that clear on November 8th, but apparently you people in the media just don't get it. A new chapter in American history begins now.
It is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America.
Donald Trump is the person to make America great again.
We are a team.
They said it couldn't be done.
Together we will lead our party back to the White House.
He said it must be done.
Beginning on January 20th, we cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore. The most important difference between our plan and that of our opponent is that our plan will put America first.
Here's J.J. McCartney.
All right, thank you, Marcus, and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the J.J. McCartney Show. I am J.J. McCartney. Thank you for joining us. Well, folks, obviously, the late-breaking news on Wednesday is bound to dominate the conversation on Thursday. I'm talking, of course, about the shooting at the Florida school. 17 dead, 15 wounded, and the 19-year-old shooter in custody. And why, oh why, does so much of this sound so familiar? Well, hello, everybody. Phone lines are open, 855-853-5227. That's our toll-free number. If you would like to express your opinion today, we would love to hear from you. Well, let's just go ahead and begin by covering the basics of the shooting in Florida. Of course, the news broke after our show was done yesterday, so it must have happened late in the school day because we keep our eyes on the headlines, and this didn't break until 4:48 p.m. Eastern Time, which was actually 12 minutes before we went off air. And it simply didn't have time to propagate before we went off air yesterday. So we, like everybody else, followed the story as it unfolded. The story starts like this. First of all, the Florida school shooting suspect was an ex-student who was flagged as a threat. He preened with guns and knives on social media, bragged about shooting rats with his BB gun, and got kicked out of school in part because he had brought bullets in his backpack, according to one classmate. He was later expelled for still undisclosed disciplinary reasons, behavioral reasons. The portrait of Nicholas Cruz, suspected of fatally shooting 17 people at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, wounded 15, killed 17 at his former school. He's a troubled teen with few friends and an obsession with guns, knives, weapons. Administrators considered him enough of a potential threat that one teacher said a warning was emailed last year against allowing him on the campus with a backpack. Well, All he would talk about is guns. Guns, knives, and hunting. According to Joshua Charo, a 16-year-old former classmate at the high school, he said, "I can't say I was shocked. From past experiences, he seemed like the kind of kid who would do something like this." Late Wednesday, detectives were digging into the past of 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, who had no previous arrests but had displayed plenty of troubling behavior before officers took him into custody after what ranks as the third deadliest school shooting in American history. "Our investigation began dissecting social media," said Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel. "Some of the things that came to mind are very, very disturbing. Cruz, who was arrested soon after the shooting and taken to the BSO headquarters, could face multiple state charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder. At Stoneman Douglas High, he was part of the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, the Junior ROTC, during his freshman year. Charo said he spoke little and was into some weird stuff. He said he used to tell me he would shoot rats with his BB gun, and he wanted this kind of gun, and how he liked to always shoot for practice." Cruz's Instagram page, identified by friends as his, but which has since been removed from the popular site, underscored his love of weapons. In the images, he sported dark bandanas over his face and beanies and baseball caps on his head. In one post, he wielded knives between his fingers, as though they were claws. In another, he showed off a small black handgun. One post on his Instagram was for an online ad for a Mossberg Maverick 88 slug shotgun. Another post showed the definition of Allahu Akbar, the Arabic phrase that, of course, is shouted by Islamic terrorists when they strike. Federal authorities, however, said Wednesday they did not believe that the shooting was connected to terrorism. Well, how the hell do you know? This goddamn bullshit. And I'm sorry, folks. A 19-year-old shooter, 17 dead, 15 wounded, and they say, oh, we don't think it's terrorism. Well, what the hell else would you call it? What else could you call it? What else would you possibly call it? Terrorism. It does not take 100 people to call it terrorism. This is as irresponsible and it's lazy. It's intellectually lazy. Intellectually lazy. Intellectually lazy. Yesterday, police said he was armed with an AR-15 rifle. Sorry about that, folks, but I get passionate about this because the laziness in the media, the laziness in law enforcement, and the trying to take the non-controversial road by saying we don't think this was terrorism. 17 dead bodies at the morgue, and you don't think it's terrorism. Allahu Akbar on his Instagram account, and you don't think it's terrorism. What do you even know the definition of the word terrorism, you moron? Good God Almighty! I am sorry, folks. I don't need to get my blood pressure up today. I know. But I have to ask the question. I mean, every single time we see this kind of shooting, I mean, we saw it in Las Vegas, for crying out loud. With what, 58, 59 people killed in Las Vegas? And they said, well, we don't think it's terror related. And now here we are in Florida. Again. Lest anybody forget the Pulse nightclub shooting. I honestly don't know what to make of the tendency by law enforcement. The tendency by law enforcement to try to dismiss with no evidence to support their thesis that this wasn't terrorism. And if I were this officer's superior officer, I'm backing up here, federal authorities said Wednesday they did not believe the shooting was connected to terrorism. Well, who are the federal authorities? Name them by name, because I want to petition the president to discipline the holy crap out of them. There is absolutely no evidence to support the theory that this wasn't terrorism. And what I would say to the individuals that claim, well, we don't think it's related to terrorism, I'm going to ask them a couple of questions. If this wasn't terrorism, then what the hell are those 17 bodies doing on slabs at the morgue? If this wasn't terrorism, then what the hell are 17 bodies doing in my morgue? What the hell? We got 15 people hospitalized. We've got 17 dead. And we have a shooter active on social media talking about Allahu Akbar on his social media accounts. And you don't think it's terrorism. If you don't think it's terrorism, then you don't deserve to keep your job. It's just that simple. Folks, phone lines are open. 855-853-5227. Sorry for the yelling. But I'm sure many of you share the frustration I share because, ladies and gentlemen, this shooting in Florida, it rings all too familiar. All too familiar. We've seen this before. We have seen this before. Well, what do you mean, JJ? What do you mean we've seen it before, huh? Well, I'll tell you what I mean. Why does it all sound so familiar? A troubled misfit on psychotropic drugs, an outcast, an AR-15, and a school. Nicholas Cruz, 19 years old, who was expelled from the school for behavioral reasons, somehow manages to get into the school. After being defined as a threat, somehow manages to get into the school. He then sets off the fire alarm so he would have a steady stream of students and teachers following fire drill procedures, making their way into the halls where the shooter would then have a much easier time mowing them down. Now, Governor Rick Scott called it pure evil, and he is right. But how many times have we seen this unfold? You know, Columbine wasn't the first school shooting. But as we approach the 19th anniversary of Columbine in April, one cannot help but note the similarities. the shooter, in Columbine's case, shooters. I mean, in this case, he actually, reports are that he set off tear gas canisters and was wearing a gas mask. Clearly, he planned this out. This is a premeditated attack. And he planned it out for maximum carnage. The only difference between this and the Columbine shootings was the shooter survived. As a matter of fact, he made his way out of the school grounds with the other students and was able to evade capture because of that. He's a registered Democrat, a self-avowed communist. He was apparently a fan of ISIS. As we said, he, posted the definition of Allahu Akbar on his website or his Instagram page or whatever. Pictures on his social media showed an obsession with guns and knives, a T-shirt in support of Che Guevara, and violent tendencies. Students at the school say this attack was predicted, expected. And when the shots started, many were sure it was Cruz. So again, we have 17 dead, 15 wounded. A nation mourns. And then, of course, cries for gun control from the bleeding hearts. Blaming the weapons instead of the perps. Here's the question I have. How might the event have been different if teachers, principals, and other faculty and staff had had guns and proper training? Armed security guards would have been a good thing. And in truth, if armed security were in place at every school, I would tend to predict that most, if not all, of these school shootings would likely never happen. But the wizards of smart in making schools gun-free zones have turned them into sitting ducks. Our schools are now just sitting ducks, just waiting for some crazed psycho to make it their personal shooting gallery. You see, folks, another national day of mourning, a day of second-guessing and bewilderment that so many of our schools have done very little to buttress the school, make it a fortress against just such violence. How can any school district in the nation still not understand that they must be ready for these kinds of threats? Instead, more addle-brained snowflakes call for another gun law. Newsflash, the gun laws are already in place. But it's bastards like Nicholas Cruz who disregard the law that are the problem. Again, blaming the guns instead of, just making our schools safer. It's a frustration, I know, for many of us that we are sitting here again, shaking our heads, bewildered. And again, one of the biggest bewilderments I have is federal officials saying that, we don't think this is terror-related. No, the guy just fond of ISIS and Allahu Akbar and 17 dead bodies at the morgue, but we don't think it's terrorism. Morons. Folks, my phone lines are open right now, and I would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. whatever they may be. Maybe it's high time for a conversation about this. Look how long it's taken for us, and we still don't have straight answers on what happened in Las Vegas. I mean, the feds, the sheriffs, the police, they've been, tight-lipped about the Las Vegas shooting for a long time now. And now we've got another shooting. And, all the earmarks are there, folks. Psychotropic drugs, an outcast. I can't tell you. I don't know. Nobody knows right now except the shooter himself. But this sure does have the earmarks. Familiar earmarks of a false flag. And, I'm not saying it didn't happen. Obviously it happened. But how it happened, why it happened, how it was allowed to happen, it leaves a lot of people asking questions today. All right, folks, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with more. And again, folks, pick up the phone and call us, 855-853-5227. We'll be back.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Hey, everybody. J.J. McCartney back here for our good friends at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Folks, there's one thing that there never seems to be a shortage of in this world, and that is uncertainty, unrest. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Natural disasters, economic downturns, whatever it is, you can be prepared by going to MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. They have got everything you need, from ProPure gravity-fed water filtration systems to Kimberly stoves to these composting toilets. Ladies and gentlemen, at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com, you can prepare for anything. Food storage, no problem. Advice, no problem. Call our good friend Sue at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Find out what's there for you. Great prices, great advice, and guess what, folks? You'll find it all at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com.
But we refuse to throw in the towel and do nothing. We refuse to let Detroit go bankrupt. I bet on American workers and American ingenuity. 3 years later, that bet is paying off in a big way.
He gave me a call this afternoon to tell me that the decision had been made to file for Chapter 9.
So the next time you see one of those brand new 2013 models on TV or on the lot, think about how far we've come together.
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
When it's time to get away, you can always find solace in the welcome arms of your friend Detroit, where the last thing anybody finds is a job, and the furthest thing from anyone's mind is responsibility, where its citizens greet you with a warm hello and toothless meth grins, where the unemployment is so high that its proud citizens can enjoy enough time to slow down as they contribute the country's worst murder rate, a place where 7 out of 10 of those murders go completely unsolved, and if the gangs don't get you, the roaming packs of wild dogs will. It's a city that's eating itself alive and been entirely run by Democrats and unions since 1961, a crystal ball for the future of the country, in a city that's as likely to change as its students are to graduate high school. You can always count on it to be waiting for you with one hand out and the other ready to shoot you in the spleen. A place that's pure Detroit.
My name is Lola Silvestri, and I'm going to be 95 this year. I was very independent. I fell, and I had to have Meals on Wheels. America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org. This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
He's not angry. He's just really intense. More J.J. McCartney Show coming up next.
What's everyone so excited about? This year is the 100th birthday of America's national parks. We've got lots of celebrations planned, so visit findyourpark.com to find out how to join the party. You can relax now.
Okay, we are back on the J.J. McCartney Show on this Thursday, the 15th day of February, yes. Some reason it just seems like it's still January. I don't know why, but it's crazy, man. Crazy. Okay, folks. It's a scene typical of a cop show. A fugitive is scrambling across an icy road to escape his relentless pursuers. There's a brief separation, but the gap closes. The fugitive ascends a snowy hillside, clutching to pull himself up as the pursuer gets closer. Finally, arms and hands make contact. The fugitive pitches down a hillside, and the capture is made. And in this case, it's reality, not fiction. And it's police in Norway pursuing and capturing a 12-year-old student for the offense of being a homeschool student. Now, there is a video that you can watch online. Go to WorldNet Daily. During the chase, the student's mother is screaming, "Some people, please help. I need people to help." Homeschool LDA, that's HSLDA, has launched an online petition campaign to complain to the Norwegian embassy in the U.S. about the atrocious treatment that to Americans is absolutely intolerable. Now, Jim Mason is the vice president of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And he says that Leif and Teresa Christensen had moved from Canada, where Teresa and son Kai are citizens, to Norway in search of opportunities. Kai, 12 years old, immediately was the target of bullies at the local school. So his parents removed him from the school and immediately began to homeschool him. They were just doing what the school should have done. They wanted to keep Kai safe and provide him with a healthy learning environment. But local government officials wouldn't tolerate that and dispatched agents of what's known as the Barnevement, the nation's child protective services and police. So in the video, Homeschool Legal Defense Association says Kai's mother, Teresa, looks on in terror, screaming for help as Kai is chased by the police, saying, "My son is being stolen by Barnevement in Norway because we want to homeschool." She shouted as helpless friends and neighbors watched. Kai is screaming no, and he is captured and taken into government custody. It was according to Ray Skorkstad and Barnett's Bestie, which helped the parents whose children have been the subject of government seizure orders. It was a brutal invasion of the family without sufficient justification. Now, Michael Donnelly is the director of global outreach for the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. He said Kai's mother told him, "We had hoped that we would be welcomed in our new home country, but I am living a nightmare. I can't believe what they did to my son." Donnelly previously fought the Barnevement in his support of the family known as the Badananyu family, whose children were taken when authorities disagreed with the Christian values of the family several years ago. He said the homeschool community needs to come together. An attack like this is an attack on homeschooling, he said. Parents are the ones who have the right to decide how best their children should be educated and what's best for them. You know, folks, this is absolutely, this is tied very closely to the persecution worldwide of Christians. It really is. You think it can't happen? You think it can't happen, but then we see this kind of proof that it does happen, and it happens more frequently than many people want to admit. Now, today it's just one kid in Norway. But these are the globalists, folks. Make no mistake about it, these are the globalists. What they are trying to do all around the world, what they're trying to do to our faith, to our parental rights, and to the rights of our children not to be terrorized. I mean, this is really, it's sad, but it happens. It happens. All right, folks. Now, of course, as I've said, we were paying attention to the Florida shooting, and it's still very fresh, but I want to let you know that there is some good news out there. In Washington State, a grandmother prevented another school shooting just 2 days ago, the day before the Florida shooting. A grandmother. One day before 17 people were killed in the Florida shooting, a grandmother in Washington State helped to stop another massacre. According to police in Everett, Washington, the grandmother of Joshua Alexander O'Connor called 911 after finding disturbing journal entries that described how the 18-year-old was planning to attack his high school. Officers were also told the grandson had a rifle stored in a guitar case. As officers reviewed copies of the journal, they were alarmed at the statements and detailed plans to shoot students and use homemade explosive devices at Aces High School. A statement from the Everett police read, one of the statements was, "I need to make this count." O'Connor reportedly wrote, according to the Daily Herald, saying, "I've been reviewing many mass shootings and bombings and attempted bombings, and I'm learning from past shooters and bombers' mistakes." Detectives serving a search warrant on February 13th reportedly found an AK-47 and inert grenades in the 18-year-old's bedroom. O'Connor was booked into the Snohomish County Jail and has reportedly been charged with attempted first-degree murder, felony assault on an officer, and first-degree robbery. Our main thing right now is gratitude, especially to the grandmother, said Andy Muntz of the Mokiteu School District, saying that couldn't have been an easy thing for her to do. The Everett police also did a wonderful job. That combination may have saved a lot of lives. The grandmother's act of heroism took place nearly 24 hours before 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz brought an AR-15 rifle into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, killing 17, injuring more than a dozen just yesterday. So, yeah, I cannot imagine that was an easy thing for the grandmother to do, but obviously she did the right thing. And We're thankful for that. You know, it's not easy in this 21st century. I mean, we love our children, we love our kids, and we want the very best for them. We want them to be happy. We want them to find fulfillment. We want them to live up to their potential. But when you see your 18-year-old grandson and you realize that he's behaving erratically and you do some snooping, and it's not a violation of trust, it's certainly just the fact that you see some telltale signs that all is not right with this guy. And I tell you, this week, I cannot imagine that it's going to be easy, especially for the kids that go to that high school in Florida, to process all of this. You know, obviously they've lost many of their classmates, and the school's athletic director was killed as well, 46-year-old. Okay, folks, we got other news to cover today as well, and we've got open phone lines, 855-853-5227. That's 855-853-5227. We are live every weekday from noon to 3 p.m. From 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Live every weekday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time here at redstatetalkradio.com and jjmccartney.com. When we come back, we're going to tell you more damning evidence. More damning evidence having to do with the dossier and with the entire ridiculous Russian collusion investigation. We'll give you all the details after we take a timeout. We'll be right back.
If you agree with JJ's conservative pillars for rescuing America's economy, stay tuned for more. If you are a liberal and think everything is okay, you can go pet your unicorn now.
Well, there's a rocket place I know where all the radicals can go. It's called the mosque, where the mullah's gonna tell you all to kill the infidels at the mosque. Yeah, the cats and chicks really get their kicks at the mosque. If you're feeling like a wreck, well, you can point yourself to Mecca at the mosque. If you're lonely as hell, you can join a sleeper cell at the mosque. Yeah, the mullahs are the maddest and the body odor's baddest at the mosque. Oh, well, you better believe it, all the refugees are at the mosque. And if your dog goes missing, better check the kitchen at the mosque. If you're a Christian or a Jew, you know they're coming after you at the mosque. At the mosque. Well, you can find Muhammad or Saeed or Ahmed at the mosque. They're building bombs in the cellar just for Pam Geller at the mosque. Yeah, they feel right at home in every gun-free zone at the mosque. So you can plan your next attack with the guys from Iraq at the mosque. Make sure your target is soft and you might really pull it off at the mosque. Oh my goodness. But don't say we didn't warn you when it comes to California at the mosque. Oh, well, the Democrats say they're gonna do some praying at the mosque. They think there's more than a smidgen of a peaceful religion at the mosque. Yeah, they're going insane with Barack Hussein at the mosque. Well, there's a lot of crazy people where you see the funky steeple at the mosque. So don't you dare be late for the caliphate at the mosque. If it's Shiites or Sunnis, they're all a bunch of loonies at the mosque. 72 virgins? Yeah, that's what they tell you at the mosque. Good luck with that.
You're listening to The J.J. McCartney Show. If you would like to learn more about being a guest on the show or just have a suggestion or comment, send your comments to the show at jjmccartney.com. The J.J. McCartney Show is broadcast by the Nightside Radio Studios in cooperation with PatriotFB.com.
Are you among the millions of Americans living with chronic pain? If so, you may think prescription opioids are the solution. Truth is, opioids only mask the pain, And they come with serious side effects, from nausea to withdrawal symptoms to overdose. There is another choice: physical therapy. Physical therapists treat pain through movement and exercise. Choose physical therapy. Visit moveforwardpt.com. This public service announcement is brought to you by the American Physical Therapy Association.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are back with more on the J.J. McCartney Show on this Thursday, the 15th day of February. And let's go to the phones and say hello to Arizona. Welcome, you're on the J.J. McCartney Show.
Hello, JJ. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
What's on your mind?
This mess with this Florida shooting is, oh my gosh, it's beyond words. It's so disgusting. Society, many generations ago, when my kids were growing up, was deciding that parents weren't allowed to discipline their children for bad behavior. And now we've raised a generation that feels entitled to do as they please and to get away with it.
Yep.
We have not taught the generation that's coming up now is even getting worse because they don't have any respect for any authority. They have no respect for life in general.
Right.
And they do not have respect for any boundaries because they don't have boundaries anymore.
Exactly right. These
are things that we need to really be looking at and looking into and taking care of. Parents should have the right to be parents. And homeschooling is not an abuse. Homeschooling is assuring that our children are raised with Christian values. That's what that is.
Well, it actually is that and more, because the curriculum that the school districts are trying to teach our kids today, it's no longer an education. It's not reading, writing, and arithmetic. It is now indoctrination, social, spoon feeding them misinformation and revised history and all of these things. What they're doing, they're no longer teaching at all. What they are doing is they are indoctrinating. And if, do the kids learn how to read? Most of them do, but some don't. But the problem is, if you have information but you don't have any moral message behind it, then what you're doing is it's like loading a gun and putting it in the hands of somebody that has absolutely no concept of what a gun is capable of doing. And in terms of what they're teaching kids in schools today, public schools today, what they are teaching them is things like tolerance. But what they're teaching them tolerance for is behavior that, a couple generations ago was intolerable. When I was going to school, I'm 55 years old. My high school career ended about 40 years ago. But if I acted up in school, and by the way, I didn't have a choice. If I acted up in school badly enough, well, the principal or the teacher would take out this wooden paddle and apply it to my backside. They did this routinely. Almost on a daily basis, some kid in the school was getting a swat to their behind because of how they behaved. And I would venture to say that not one of those students was permanently damaged by it, but they learned a lesson from it. Now, I am not for child abuse, but spanking a child's bottom when they misbehave is not child abuse. As a matter of fact, the Bible says if you don't discipline your child, that you hate them. It's an expression of indifference, and I don't care if you don't discipline your children when they act up. And there's a reason that God gave kids a backside. I mean, really, I'm not endorsing child abuse, but by God, spanking a child that's misbehaving is not child abuse.
And JJ, I don't. In my generation and your generation, because I'm only 2 years older than you, our generation, we had kids that were farmers and hunters and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
That had shotguns on racks in their trucks, you know.
Oh, we used to bring them in to show and tell. It was not that big of a deal.
Yes, but we had a respect for them because our parents taught us to respect them.
That's right.
To know that they were a tool to be used either as self-defense against whatever was going to threaten us or attack us, and or hunting. You know, this kind of thing that the kids are doing now, it's like the parents, they give these kids these games like Grand Theft Auto and I don't even know what other games.
Right.
That the kids, they sit in front of these games for hours and hours on end and teaches them to steal, to rape, to murder, to whatever.
And to disassociate the violence from the people. I mean, it dehumanizes is what it does.
Yes, and Hollywood has turned the same way with the movies that they're cranking out, you know. I mean, I'm glad to see that there's some more Christian movies coming out, you know, because really we need to be seeing values and Christian morals and whatever come back into this country, but it's just not what it needs to be. There needs to be something in the home as well from the parents, and parents are afraid to discipline their children because CPS or whoever comes running in there and grabs the kids and takes them out of the home, you know,
right.
without sometimes doing a full investigation. And I don't know how other states are in the nation, but in Arizona, they're not looking to put the children back with their mother or their father. They're looking to put the children in with strangers.
Yep. Who
the state has deemed possible and good parenting. But most of these people that they send into most of the kids they send into the foster system are sent into situations that are way worse than what they had at home.
Yep, that's absolutely true. I mean,
children are getting killed in these foster homes. It's no joke. Or they're getting molested in these foster homes. It's not a joke, you know. But they need to allow parents to be parents, to discipline their children, not beat them up or beat them or whatever, but allow the parent, if they need to take away their whatever they got, their toys or whatever, put them in their room on restriction. We didn't die because we were put on restriction.
No,
you know?
No.
We didn't die because we got our phone privileges taken away or we got our TV time taken away from us. That did not harm us at all. We didn't get killed because our mom and dad spanked us, and it's not going to kill them now.
Right.
It's more likely going to save more lives if there's some discipline in the home.
And, you know, something else that needs to happen, and I believe that young people they're starving for this. In our culture today, we need to find our way back. And some people say it's impossible. I say nothing is impossible. But we need to find our way back to Mayberry. I mean, we really do. Entertainment in America today is so rancid. It is so godless. It is so atrocious. But we need to find our way back to Mayberry. We need to find our way back to ideals that, you know, role models for these young people who, you know, if children are being raised in a home with just one parent, then the entire dynamic that they're raised in has changed. And then when you take television, the cesspool that it is today, and you have people watching shows like, you know, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, it was this ridiculous Honey Boo Boo stuff, you know. And you know, before that, you had the show with the Kardashians, and you had the you know, shows with, I mean, just terrible shows. Anna Nicole Smith had a show, and it was, there's no other way to categorize it, but it was the finest, refined, and pure stupidity I've ever seen anywhere. Completely vapid, pointless, and yet people watched. And, you know, you look at where the world is today, you look at where America is today, you wonder why, well, why do we have school shootings? Why do we have all this stuff going on? Well, you consider it. I mean, you talked about Grand Theft Auto, all the other video games that are out there, that, you know, they're teaching children to indulge a part of their brain that is enjoying violence. And I can tell you that children that have conscience don't like those kinds of games. They don't like those kinds of TV shows. You know, one of the most gratifying things as a parent is when your children make choices that reinforce the values that they were taught. And the other day, you know, having a conversation with my daughter, you know, she's grown up now, but she just does not enjoy gratuitously violent movies, TV shows, and she will not sit through even, you know, mildly violent shows because she just doesn't like it. And she thinks there's too big of a disconnect between that type of violence that is, you know, the tacit approval of which is demonstrated in the fact that there are so many shows like that on TV. Society has lost its standards. We used to have moral standards in America. Now, what do we have? We have complete lack of discipline, discretion, and, you know, the things they show on television today are things that they wouldn't even have dared to put into movies 50 years ago.
This is true.
And you know, I shake my head. I really do. The acceptance of certain things in our society has been, it's been a political process by which they are trying to program our young people so that their standards are even lesser and looser than today. Although that's hard for us to imagine coming from where we came from in our generation. You know, but I honestly...
I just don't... I think that we're lacking empathy for others as well, you know? And I'm not talking sympathy or whatever. I'm talking empathy. Like, how would you feel if this certain thing was done to you? This is something I taught my kids, you know? Have empathy with whoever it is that you're dealing with in your daily life, whether you walk out to the store or whatever, because you don't know what someone else has gone through. At least try to consider how you would feel if whatever you're saying or doing to someone else, how that's going to feel if it was happening to you.
Right.
And my children learned this early on, and they were disciplined because I didn't really give a flying flip about whatever the society was saying about disciplining the children or not disciplining the children, because I thought not disciplining them would be causing them worse harm than if I allowed them to grow up without any kind of boundaries, and then they go out into the world at 18, 19 years of age, break the law in some kind of way, either harming someone else or stealing or doing whatever, thinking that's okay, and then the police come banging on the door and put them under arrest, throw them in handcuffs, throw them into the jail cell, and they are not comprehending why this is happening, when the whole time they were growing up, they got away with it. I would not allow my children to get away with it.
Understandable, absolutely. Susan, thank you so much. We're out of time. Top of the hour. We'll come back with hour number 2 of the J.J. McCartney Show on RedStateTalkRadio.com and JJMcCartney.com. Back with more right after the break.
California, at least 13 people were arrested as hundreds blocked traffic on 2 major highways, waving Mexican flags and burning a giant effigy of Donald Trump. Police fired rubber bullets, and pepper spray at hundreds of protesters after the crowds took over major intersections.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake, falling, 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 falling.
Fraud, homophobia, sexual assault, white supremacy.
In terms of reaching out and being inclusive, he's done that too. And a will to risk to make things better, and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities.
White privilege!
Load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
Here in New York, as many as 10,000 people surged through the streets and surrounded the barricaded-off Trump Tower where Donald Trump lives.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
Reject the president-elect! Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
I think it speaks to the disenfranchisement of the people that someone like him could be seen as offering anything to the masses.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Little snowflake falling from the sky.
What about gay people? Trump has vowed to protect the LGBT community from a fanatical ideology that represents its biggest threat, radical Islam.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology.
Racist, sexist, anti-gay. Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake, falling, 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 falling.
He is a racist.
Under Obama, more black people are living below the poverty line. The number of African Americans on food stamps has increased 58% under Obama.
On every leading economic issue, on the major economic issues, black Americans have lost ground in every one of those leading categories. So for the last 10 years, it's not been good for black folks.
Is this how the left helps black communities? By making them poorer and more dependent on government. Race relations are at their worst in decades. 8 years of Obama has been devastating for the black community.
He is a sexist. He is a neo-Nazi.
Well, we don't understand why you called in the National Guard.
Falling on my nose.
Not my president. He is a lying ass.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
Fake ass.
Little snowflake falling from the sky.
Dumb ass son of a bitch.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake falling, 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 falling.
That's not my president! That's not my president! Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Falling in my hand.
Thank you for taking America back 60 years of progress.
Falling on my head.
You just voted in a Nazi fascist.
Falling on my nose. Falling in my hand. Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do?
Live from the Nightside Radio Studios.
This is the JJ McCartney Show.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Coming to you from Nebraska by way of Alaska. here's J.J. McCartney.
Okay, thank you, Marcus, and welcome back, everybody. It's the J.J. McCartney Show, hour number 2 on this 15th day of February, and we've got news that I want to share with you. And ladies and gentlemen, I got a lengthy story, and this is going to probably take most of the hour to share with you, but it's a great commentary, and everybody needs to hear it. So we'll share it with you. Be sure and tell all your friends, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is some great thinking from Lee Smith. Lee Smith at the Federalist. And the headline reads, "The media stopped reporting the Russia collusion story." They stopped reporting the Russia collusion story because they helped create it. Yeah, half the country wants to know why the press won't cover the growing scandal now implicating the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice, and threatening to reach the State Department, CIA, and perhaps even the Obama White House. After all, the release last week of a less redacted version of Senator Charles Grassley and Lindsey Graham's January 4th letter showed that the FBI secured a FISA warrant to search the communications of a Trump campaign advisor based on a piece of opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. The Fourth Amendment rights of an American citizen were violated to allow one political party to spy on another. If the press did its job and reported the facts, the argument goes, then it wouldn't just be Republicans and Trump supporters demanding accountability and justice. Americans across the political spectrum would understand the nature and extent of the abuses and crimes touching not just one political party and its presidential candidate, but the rights of every American. Now, that's all true, but irrelevant. The reasons the press will not cover the story are suggested in the Graham-Grassley letter itself. The letter details how Christopher Steele, the former British spy who allegedly authored the documents claiming ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, told the FBI he wasn't talking to the press about his investigation. In a British court, however, Steele acknowledged briefing several media organizations on the material in his dossier. According to the British court documents, Steele briefed the New York Times, the Washington Post, Yahoo News, the New Yorker, and CNN in October. He talked to Mother Jones, reporter David Korn, by Skype. It was Korn's October 31st article, anonymously sourced to Steele, that alerted the FBI their informant was speaking to the press. Grassley and Graham referred Steele to the Department of Justice for a criminal investigation because he lied to the FBI. The list of media outfits and journalists made aware of Steele's investigation is extensive. Reuters reported that it too was briefed on the dossier. And while it refrained from reporting on it before the election, its national security reporter, Mark Hosenball, became an advocate of the dossier's findings after November 2016. The BBC's Paul Wood, wrote in January 2017 that he was briefed on the dossier a week before the election. Newsweek's Kurt Eichenwald likely saw Steele's work around the same time because he published an article days before the election based on a Western intelligence source, Steele, who cited names and data points that could only come from the Democratic National Committee and Clinton-funded opposition research. A line from the Grassley-Graham letter points to an even larger circle of media outfits that appear to have been in contact with Steele or Fusion GPS, the Washington, D.C. law firm that contracted him for the opposition research the Clinton campaign and DNC commissioned. Said during the summer of 2016, the Grassley-Graham letter reads, reports of some of the dossier allegations began circulating among reporters and people involved in Russian issues. Indeed, it looks like Steele and Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson may have persuaded a number of major foreign policy and national security writers in Washington and New York that Trump and his team were in league with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Those journalists include New Yorker editor David Remnick, Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg, former New Republic editor Franklin Foer, and Washington Post columnist Ann Applebaum. A Foer story published in Slate on July 4th, 2016, appears to be central. Titled Putin's Puppet, Foer's piece argues the Trump campaign was overly Russia-friendly. Foer discusses Trump's team, including campaign convention manager Paul Manafort, who worked with former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, a Putin ally, and Carter Page, who Foer wrote advised the state-controlled natural gas giant Gazprom and helped it attract Western investors. Now, that's how Page described himself in a March 2016 Bloomberg interview. But as Julia Ioffe reported in a September 23, 2016 Politico article, Page was a mid-level executive at Merrill Lynch in Moscow who played the role in any of the big deals that he boasted about. As Ioffe shows, almost no one in Moscow remembered Carter Page until Trump read his name off a piece of paper handed to him during a March interview with the Washington Post. Almost no one in the Washington foreign policy world had heard of Carter Page either. So what got Foer interested in Page? Were Steele and Simpson already briefing reporters on their opposition research into the Trump campaign? Another Foer story for Slate on October 31st, 2016. Article about the Trump Organization's computer servers pinging a Russian bank was reportedly pushed to him by Fusion GPS. Page and Manafort are the protagonists of the Steele dossier. The former one of the latter's intermediaries with Russian officials and associates of Putin. So Page's July 7th speech in Moscow attracted wide U.S. media coverage. But Foer's article, published several days earlier, the Slate article, then, looks like the predicate for allegations against Carter Page made in the dossier after his July Russia trip. For example, according to Steele's investigations, Page was offered a 19% stake in Rosneft, one of the world's energy giants, in exchange for help repealing sanctions related to Russia's 2014 incursion into Ukraine. Many have noted the absurdity that the FISA warrant on Carter Page was chiefly based, according to a House Intelligence Committee memo, on the dossier and Michael Isikoff's September 23, 2016 news story, also based on the dossier. But much of the Russiagate campaign was conducted in this circular manner. Steele and Simpson built an echo chamber with their opposition research, parts of the law enforcement and intelligence communities, and the press, all reinforcing one another. Plant an item in the open air and watch it grow, like Page's role in the Trump campaign. Why else was Foer or anyone so interested in Page? Why was Page's Moscow speech so closely watched and widely covered? According to the Washington Post, Page chided American policymakers for an often hypocritical focus on democratization, inequality, corruption, and regime change in its dealings with Russia, China, and Central Asia. As peculiar as it may have sounded, for a graduate of the Naval Academy to cast a skeptical eye on American exceptionalism, Page's speech could hardly have struck the policy establishment as shocking or even novel. They'd been hearing versions of it for the last 8 years from the President of the United States, Barack Obama. In Obama's first speech before the United Nations General Assembly on September 23, 2009, he insisted that no country, least of all America, has the right to tell other countries how to organize their political lives, saying, quote, "Democracy cannot be imposed on any nation from the outside. Each society must search for its own path, and no path is perfect. Each country will pursue a path rooted in the culture of its people and in its past traditions." Obama sounded even more wary of American leadership on his way out of office 8 years later in his 2016 UNGA speech. The 2009 Nobel laureate said, "I do not think that America can or should impose our system of government on other countries." Obama was addressing not just foreign nations, but perhaps more pointedly his domestic political rivals. In 2008, Obama campaigned against the Iraq War and the Republican policymakers who toppled Saddam Hussein to remake Iraq as a democracy. All during his presidency, Obama rebuffed critics who petitioned the administration to send arms or troops to advance U.S. interests and values abroad, most notably in Ukraine and Syria. In 2016, it was Trump who ran against the Republican foreign policy establishment, which is why hundreds of GOP policymakers and foreign policy intellectuals signed 2 letters distancing themselves from the party candidate. The thin Republican bench of foreign policy experts available to Trump is a big reason why he named the virtually unknown Carter Page to his team. So why was it any surprise that Page sounded like the Republican candidate who sounded like the Democratic president? On the right, many national security and foreign policy writers heard and were worried by the clear echoes of Obama's policies in the Trump campaign's proposals. Did those writing from the left side of the political spectrum not see the continuities? Writing in the Washington Post, July 21st, 2016, Applebaum explained how a Trump presidency could destabilize Europe. The issue, she explained, was Trump's positive attitude towards Putin. If Trump's attitude towards Putin was positive, she said the extent of the Trump-Russia business connection has already been laid out by Franklin Foer at Slate, who wrote Applebaum. She named Page and his long-standing connections to Russian companies. So did Applebaum's talking points come from Steele's opposition research? Even more suggestive to Applebaum is that just a few days before her article was published, Trump's campaign team helped alter the Republican Party platform to remove support for Ukraine from the Republican National Committee's platform. Maybe, she hinted, that was because of Trump's aide Manafort's ties to Yanukovych. So did those talking points come from Steele's opposition research? Manafort's relationship with Yanukovych had been widely reported in the U.S. press long before he signed on with the Trump campaign. In 2007, Glenn Simpson was one of the first to write about their shady dealings while he was still working at the Wall Street Journal. The corrupt nature of the Manafort-Yanukovych relationship is an important part of the dossier. So is the claim that in exchange for Russia releasing the DNC emails, the Trump team had agreed to sideline Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue. The reality, however, is that the Trump campaign team never removed support for Ukraine from the party platform. In a March 18, 2017 Washington Examiner article, Byron York interviewed the convention delegate who pushed for tougher language on Russia and got it. In the end, the platform, already fairly strong on the Russia-Ukraine issue, wrote York, was strengthened, not weakened. Maybe Applebaum just picked it up from her own paper's misreporting. For Applebaum, it was hard to understand why Trump would express skepticism about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, except to appease Putin. She referred to a recent interview in which Trump cast doubt on the fundamental basis of transatlantic stability, NATO's Article 5 guarantee. If Russia invades, it said, if Russia invades, Trump said, he'd have to think first before defending U.S. allies. Well, well, I tell you what, folks, this just goes on and on. In an article published the very same day in The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg made many of the very same observations. Titled, "It's Official, Hillary Clinton is Running Against Vladimir Putin." The article opens, the Republican nominee for president, Donald J. Trump, has chosen this week to unmask himself as a de facto agent of Russian President Vladimir Putin. What was the evidence? Well, for one, Page's business interests. Trump's expressed admiration for Putin and other equivocating mercenary statements, wrote Goldberg, are unprecedented in the history of Republican foreign policy making. However, insofar as Trump's fundamental aim was to find some common ground with Putin, it's a goal that, for better or worse, has been a 25-year U.S. policy constant across party lines, starting with George Herbert Walker Bush. Every American commander-in-chief, since the end of the Cold War, sought to reset relations with Russia, starting with George Herbert Walker Bush. But Trump, according to Goldberg, was different. Trump's understanding of America's role in the world aligns with Russia's geostrategic interests. Here, Goldberg rang the same bells as Applebaum. The Trump campaign watered down the Republican National Committee's platform on Ukraine. The GOP nominee questioned whether the U.S. under his leadership would keep its NATO commitments, including Article 5. Thus, Goldberg concluded Donald Trump, should he be elected president, would bring an end to the post-war international order. Only problem with it is it was not true. Just little tidbits. Just not true. So, that last bit sounds very, very bad, coincidentally. It's similar to a claim made in the very first paragraph of the Steele dossier. The Russian regime claims one of Steele's unnamed sources has been cultivating Trump to encourage splits and divisions in the Western alliance. The West won the Cold War because the United States kept it unified. NATO. David Remnick's, he saw that, it happened. He saw it up close. Assigned to the Washington Post's Moscow bureau in 1988. Remnick witnessed the end of the Soviet Union, which he documented in his award-winning book, Lenin's Tomb. So it's hardly surprising that in his August 3rd, 2016 New Yorker article, quote, Trump and Putin, a love story, unquote, Remnick sounded alarms concerning the Republican presidential candidate's manifest affection for the Russian president. Citing the original reporting of Foer's seminal Slate article, the New Yorker editor contended that one reason for Trump's attitude has to do with his business ambitions. Remnick elaborated one of Trump's foreign policy advisors has long-standing ties to Gazprom, a pillar of Russia's energy industry. Now, who could that be? That's right, Carter Page. With Applebaum and Goldberg and Remnick worried about Trump's lack of support for Ukraine and the fact that Trump has declared NATO obsolete and has suggested that he might do away with Article 5. Well, does that sound familiar? Now, this brings us to the fundamental question. Is it possible that these top national security and foreign policy journalists were focused on something else during Obama's 2 terms in office? Something that had nothing to do with foreign policy or national security? I mean, it seems we must even entertain the possibility that they slept for 8 years, because nearly everything that frightened them about the prospect of a Trump presidency had already transpired under Barack Obama. The Trump team wanted to stop short of having the Republican National Committee platform promise lethal support to Ukraine. which was in keeping with official U.S. policy, by the way. Obama didn't want to arm the Ukrainians. He ignored numerous congressional efforts to get him to change his mind. There has been a strong bipartisan well of support for quite some time for providing lethal support, said California Representative Adam Schiff, but Obama refused. As for the Western Alliance, or international order, or however you want to put it, it was under the Obama administration that Russia set up shop at NATO's southern border with the Syrian conflict. Moscow reestablished its footprint in the Middle East after 40 years of American policy designed to keep it from meddling in U.S. spheres of influence. But under Obama, Russia's enhanced regional position threatened 3 U.S. allies, Israel, Jordan, and NATO member Turkey. In 2012, Moscow's Syrian client brought down a Turkish Air Force reconnaissance plane. According to a 2013 Wall Street Journal article, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan raised alarms in the U.S. by suggesting that Turkey might invoke NATO's Article 5. However, according to the journal, neither the U.S. nor NATO was interested in rushing to Article 5. NATO was so wary of getting pulled into Syria that top alliance officials balked at even contingency planning for an intervention force to protect Syrian civilians. For better or worse, Syria President Bashar al-Assad feels he can count on NATO not to intervene right now. A senior Western official said, whatever one thinks of Obama's foreign policy, it is hardly arguable that he wisely, cautiously, in the most educated and creative of ways, or unwisely, stupidly, and cravenly, the choice of adjectives is yours, ceded America's interests and those of key allies in Europe and the Middle East in an effort to avoid conflict with Vladimir Putin and Russia. When Russia did occupy Crimea and the eastern portion of Ukraine, there was little pushback from the White House. The Obama administration blinked. Even when Putin's escalation of forces in Syria sent millions more refugees fleeing abroad, including into Europe. Now, surely it couldn't have escaped Applebaum's notice that Obama's posture toward Russia made Europe vulnerable. She's a specialist in Europe and Russia, as she's written books on both. Her husband is the former foreign minister of Poland. So, how after 8 years of Obama's appeasement of Russia that threatened to, withhold natural gas from Europe, how in that did the Trump team pose a unique threat to European stability? The real threat to European stability was the Obama regime and their inaction. Now, what about Goldberg? Is it possible that he never bothered to research the foreign policy priorities of a president he interviewed 5 times between 2008 and 2016? In the last interview from March of 2016, Obama told Goldberg he was very proud of the moment in 2013 when he declined to attack Assad for deploying chemical weapons. As Obama put it, "Oh, that's when we broke the Washington playbook." He chose diplomacy instead. He made a deal with Russia over Assad's conventional arsenal, which Syria continued to use against civilians throughout Obama's term. Again, regardless of how you feel about Obama's decisions, the fact is that he struck an agreement with Moscow that ensured the continued reign of its Syrian ally, who gassed little children. Yet only 4 months later, Goldberg worried that a Trump presidency would liberate dictators first and foremost, his ally Vladimir Putin, to advance their own interests. Remnick wrote a 2010 blog, a biography of Obama, He wrote a 2010 biography of Obama, but did he too pay any attention to the policies of the man he interviewed frequently over nearly a decade? How is this possible? Did some of America's top journalists really sleepwalk through Obama's 2 terms in office, only to wake in 2016 and find Donald Trump and his campaign becoming dangerously cozy with a historical American adversary? Of course not. They enlisted their bylines in a political campaign on behalf of the Democratic candidate for president and rehearsed the talking points that Steele later documented. But weren't the authors of these articles, big-name journalists, embarrassed to be seen reading from a single script and publishing the same article with similar titles within the space of 2 weeks? Weren't they worried it would look like they were taking opposition research from the same source? No, not really. In a sense, these stories weren't actually meant to be read. They existed for their purpose of validating the ensuing social media messaging. The stories were written around the headlines, which were written for Twitter. Putin's puppet. It's official, Hillary Clinton is running against Vladimir Putin. Trump and Putin, a love story. The Kremlin's candidate. The stories were vessels, built only to launch thousands of 140-character salvos to then sink into the memory hole. Since everyone took Clinton's victory for granted, journalists assumed extravagant claims alleging an American presidential candidate illicit ties to adversarial power would fade, just as the fireworks punctuating Hillary's acceptance speech would vanish in the end. And the sooner the stories were forgotten, the better, since they frankly sounded kooky, conspiratorial, as if the heirs to the Algonquin Round Table sported tinfoil hats while tossing back martinis and trading saucy limericks. Yes, the Trump-Russia collusion media campaign really was delusional and deranged. It really was a conspiracy theory. So after the unexpected happened and Trump won the election, the Russiagate campaign morphed into something more urgent, something twisted and delirious. When CNN broke the story, co-written by Evan Perez, a former colleague and friend of Fusion GPS principals, that the Obama administration's intelligence chiefs had briefed Trump on the existence of the dossier, it not only cleared the way for BuzzFeed to publish the document, it also signaled the press that the intelligence community was on its side. Now, this completed the echo chamber. Yes, it did. I mean, it's the echo chamber. What is the echo chamber, you ask? Well, it starts with social media and then goes corporate mismanagement, damaged traditional media institutions as newspapers and magazines and, journalists around the country went bankrupt when ownership couldn't figure out how to make money off the new digital advertising model. An entire generation of journalists, experience, expertise, and ethics was lost, and it was replaced, as one Obama White House official famously explained, by 27-year-olds who literally know nothing. But the first vehicle of the Russiagate campaign were not bloggers or recent journalism school grads, lacking wisdom or guidance to wave off a piece of patent nonsense. They were journalists at the top of their profession, editors-in-chief, columnists, specialists, in precisely the subjects that the dossier alleges to treat foreign policy and national security. They didn't get fooled. They volunteered their reputations to perpetrate a hoax on the American public. And that's why after a year of thousands of furious allegations, all of which concerning Trump are unsubstantiated, the press will not report the real scandal in which it plays a leading role. When the reckoning day comes, Russiagate is likely to be seen not as a symptom of the collapse of the American press, but as one of the causes for it. Now, folks, you know, and I know, that this whole Russiagate investigation was based on flimsy innuendos. Is there any fact at all in it, the dossier? If there is any fact at all in the dossier, it's the kind of fact that has absolutely no relevance on Donald Trump, the candidate, or Donald Trump, the president. And what you have in Mueller's investigation is you have a prosecutor with no evidence in search of a non-existent crime. That is all it is. And that's all it ever will be. We'll be back.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Hey, everybody. J.J. McCartney back here for our good friends at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. You know, folks, there's one thing that there never seems to be a shortage of in this world, and that is uncertainty, unrest. You know, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Natural disasters, economic downturns, whatever it is, you can be prepared by going to MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. They have got everything you need, from ProPure gravity-fed water filtration systems to Kimberly stoves to these composting toilets. Ladies and gentlemen, at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com, you can prepare for anything. Food storage? No problem. Advice? No problem. Call our good friend Sue at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Find out what's there for you. Great prices, great advice, and guess what, folks? You'll find it all at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. I was working division when the call came in. An internet site was down. It needed attention immediately. First things first. What happened? I got our forensics team on it at once. They'd seen it a million times before.
With all due respect, John, I am head of IT, and I have it on good authority. If you type Google into Google, you can break the internet. So please, no one can try it. Even for a joke, it's not a laughing matter. You can break the internet.
When will people learn?
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Hi. I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
Well, before I left my campsite, I was putting out my fire, and out of nowhere, Smokey Bear showed up and hugged me?
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. He likes it when people correctly put out their campfires. He's pretty big on wildfire prevention. He's just letting you know you did good with a hug. He's a hugger.
I just got a bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update!
All right, I'm going to let you go now. I've got a lot of ranger stuff to do. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
JJMcCartney.com.
Are you among the millions of Americans living with chronic pain? If so, you may think prescription opioids are the solution. The truth is, the benefits of opioids are limited. Opioids only mask the pain. Opioids also come with serious side effects, ranging from nausea to withdrawal symptoms to overdose. As many as 25% of people who are prescribed opioids struggle with addiction. And those who are addicted to opioids are 40 times more likely to move on to heroin. No one wants to live in pain, but no one should put their health at risk to be pain-free. There is another choice: physical therapy. Physical therapists treat pain through movement and exercise, no warning labels required, and you get to be an active participant in your care. Choose to treat your pain safely. Choose physical therapy. Visit moveforwardpt.com to find a physical therapist near you. This public service announcement is brought to you by the American Physical Therapy Association.
All right, we are back on the J.J. McCartney Show. More news to share with you now. In the aftermath of yesterday's shooting in Florida, some eyebrows got raised today, including my own, when Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin called on Congress to look into gun violence issue after school shooting. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin today called on Congress to look into issues related to gun violence, saying, I will say, personally, I think the gun violence, it's a tragedy, what we seen yesterday, and I urge Congress to look at these issues. Mnuchin said at a House Ways and Means Committee hearing. Mnuchin's comments were notable because he was the first senior Trump administration official to call for a congressional review after the massacre. He was responding to questions from Representative John Lewis, a Democrat of Georgia, about whether there was any money in President Trump's new budget to address gun violence. Well, all due respect, I believe that there is adequate funding already addressing gun violence. The problems won't get solved by spending federal money, Mr. Mnuchin. That's not the problem. Now, meanwhile, a freshman at a Palos Heights High School in Chicago was arrested earlier this week after posing with an AK-47 in photos shared on Snapchat. The Cook County Sheriff's Office said detectives were notified of the images Sunday afternoon. The 15-year-old student at Shepherd High School was arrested Sunday evening at his home in Worth. One of the images shared online included the school's name. The boy was charged as a juvenile with misdemeanor disorderly conduct. The sheriff's office spokeswoman said the gun that the youth posed with was legally owned by an adult, but not his parents. See, this is where people can get a little crazy. Now, here's another example of why, Mr. Mnuchin, we don't need to spend more money to address gun violence. This from the BuzzFeed News column. The FBI was warned about the school shooting threat from a YouTube user named Nicholas Cruz in a comment on a video stating, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." The video's creator was alerted the video's creator alerted both the FBI and YouTube. So what you have here is the shooter commenting that he's going to be a school shooter, and the creator of the YouTube video forwarding the information to the FBI. This is a red flag. Last fall, a Mississippi bail bondsman, frequent YouTube vlogger, noticed an alarming comment left on one of his videos that said, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter," said a user named Nicholas Cruz. The YouTuber, 36-year-old Ben Benight, alerted the FBI, emailed a screenshot of the comment to the Bureau's tips account. He also flagged the comment to YouTube, which removed it from the video. Agents with the Bureau's Mississippi field office got back to him immediately, Benight said, and conducted an in-person interview the following day on September 25th. They came to my office the next morning and asked me if I knew anything about the person. Benight said, "I didn't." They took a copy of the screenshot, and that was the last I heard from them. FBI agents contacted Benight again Wednesday after a 19-year-old named Nicholas Cruz opened fire at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, killing at least 17 people. The FBI had missed the warning signs about the alleged shooter, a former student who was expelled from the high school last year for disciplinary reasons. Classmates, relatives, and neighbors have described Cruz as a troubled loner who often talked about guns and flaunted his obsession with weapons on his social media accounts. And Jim Gard, a math teacher at the school, told the Miami Herald that the teen had previously been identified as a potential threat to other students. Though his name matches the YouTube user flagged in September, FBI officials would not say whether they have confirmed that the account belonged to Cruz. But around 4:30 p.m. Wednesday, about 30 minutes after Cruz was taken into custody by police in Broward County, Special Agent Ryan Furr with the FBI's Miami field office called Benight and left him a voicemail. "I think we spoke with you in the past about a complaint that you made about someone making a comment on YouTube channel," the agent Ryan Furr said in the message, which Benoit provided to BuzzFeed. "I just wanted to follow up with you," said the agent, "on that and ask you a question with something that's come up, if you wouldn't mind giving me a ring." A few hours later, Benight said FBI agents in Mississippi visited him again in person, pressing for more information about the YouTube user Nicholas Cruz. "They asked me if I knew who he was. I didn't. I don't," said Benight. Then they left. When contacted by BuzzFeed, Furr declined to comment on the call and directed questions about the shooting to the FBI's Public Affairs Office. The office did not respond to multiple calls and emails last night. The Nicholas Cruz YouTube account remained active until Wednesday evening. It has since been deleted. However, due to multiple or severe violations of YouTube's policies on violence, YouTube did not immediately respond to BuzzFeed News' questions about the account. Ladies and gentlemen, is there any doubt in anybody's mind that the FBI dropped the ball here? Here you have somebody identified by name on YouTube declaring that they will be a professional school shooter, tipped by the YouTube user whose video was the one that was commented on by Nicholas Cruz. And then you have the school administrators who had identified him as a threat. And then nothing happened until the Valentine's Day Massacre Part 2. The FBI has taken a lot of lumps in the last several weeks and months. And I must say, rightfully so. The FBI is a mess. The FBI is a dysfunctional mess. More concerned with creating a false narrative about the president than about doing their damn jobs. Now, that's not an indictment of every FBI agent, but clearly, systemically, there's a big problem with the FBI. They dropped the ball. And this happened on their watch. Christopher Wray should be fired. We need a functional FBI, and for that, we need a get-it-done director of the FBI. That's what is needed. And Mr. Trump, if you're listening, it's time for action, my friend. It's time for action, Mr. President. Christopher Wray and his FBI dropped the ball in a momentous and terrible way. That, over and above everything else that he has done wrong in the last year. Mr. President, please find someone that's qualified, that's tough as nails, and that doesn't tolerate the BS. Because Christopher Wray is just another bureaucrat in the do-nothing FBI. Now, if that sounds harsh, I'm sorry, but 17 bodies are in the morgue in Florida. The results speak for themselves. It is time for a wholesale change at the FBI. And the Department of Justice, for that matter. All right, my friends. Let's please pray for the victims and their families. Please pray for the survivors. And if I may, please pray for some friends of ours, personal friends of ours, that are in need of some real supportive prayer right now. That's all I can tell you. Please pray for them. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for the Thursday show. Be good to yourselves, and if you possibly can, be good to someone else. And remember, we will win in the end because there are more of us than there are of them. Because God is with us. And because we are all in this thing together. Have a great rest of your Thursday. See you on Friday. Until then, God bless. Bye-bye.